Hi, I'm Katie Wilson and welcome to A News. Here are the headlines. Islamabad says it struck Indian military targets on Saturday in response to a deadly Indian offensive. European leaders arrive in Kyiv for talks with Zelensky on ceasefire proposal. Russia marked the 80th anniversary of Victory Day with a large military parade. At least 13 civilians were killed and more than 50 others injured in Pakistani Kashmir on Saturday, the region's disaster authority said. Tensions between India and Pakistan have escalated dramatically, with both nuclear-armed neighbours launching military strikes across the border. Islamabad says it struck Indian military targets early on Saturday in response to a deadly Indian offensive.
Today on 10th.
The Pakistani military announced on Saturday it had launched retaliatory strikes against military installations in India. The strikes, part of what Islamabad has named Operation Bunyanun Marsus, or Iron Wall, targeted key Indian sites, including a missile storage facility in the Beas region. According to Pakistan's army, the operation came in direct response to Operation Sindoor, an Indian military campaign conducted on May the 6th that killed 33 people and injured 62 inside Pakistan. State-run Pakistan television, citing military sources, reported that all Indian air bases involved in the May the 6th strikes were being targeted simultaneously. The report added that Pakistani drones were seen flying over the Indian capital, New Delhi. Pakistani forces are using Al-Fatah missiles, named in memory of Pakistani children killed during the Indian strikes on May the 6th and 7th against Indian targets. In an interview with Geo News, Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar said Pakistan launched the strikes as a last resort, following what he described as India's continued escalation. He stated that the future trajectory of the conflict depends entirely on India's actions. Ishaq Dar also claimed that Pakistani forces had successfully neutralized around 80 Israeli-made Harop drones launched by India over the past 2 days. Earlier during a midnight news conference, Pakistan Army spokesman Lieutenant General Ahmad Sharif Chowdhury stated that India had fired missiles at several Pakistan Air Force air bases, including the Nur Khan Air Base near Islamabad.
To further update on the attacks by India, the missile attack by India on the Pakistan Air Force bases, majority of missiles have been intercepted by the alert air defense system of the Pakistan Armed Forces. The few that have been able to sneak in have not been able to cause any damage to the flying assets of Pakistan Air Force as per the initial damage assessment reports.
India has justified its strikes as a retaliation for a deadly attack last month on Hindu tourists in Indian-administered Kashmir. New Delhi blames Islamabad for supporting the attackers, a claim Pakistan has strongly denied. Since Wednesday, both countries have engaged in intense cross-border hostilities, including artillery shelling, drone incursions, and missile exchanges. At least 48 people have reportedly been killed in the ongoing conflict, though these figures haven't yet been independently verified. As the situation continues to spiral, concerns are growing over the potential for further escalation between the two nuclear-armed rivals.
The G7 is calling on India and Pakistan to engage in direct dialogue, while the US government said it has offered assistance in starting talks. The US says Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been in touch with both sides. After a call on Friday between Rubio and Pakistan's army chief, the US State Department said Rubio has offered assistance in starting constructive talks to avoid future conflicts. Rubio has also held regular calls with Pakistan's Prime Minister and India's Foreign Minister since the end of April. The leaders of Britain, France, Germany and Poland arrived in Kyiv on Saturday for talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The visit marks the first time the leaders of the four countries have travelled together to Ukraine. The summit will discuss a US and European proposal for a 30-day ceasefire in the war with Russia. According to a French diplomatic source, new sanctions against Russia could potentially be jointly imposed if Moscow refuses the proposal. Almost 20 European foreign ministers have gathered in Lviv in Ukraine, where they signed a statement endorsing the creation of a special tribunal to prosecute Russia for its aggression against Ukraine. The EU also pledged €1 billion from frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine's defence efforts.
Almost 20 European foreign ministers arrived in city of western Ukraine, Lviv. During the visit, they took part in a memorial ceremony at a military cemetery where they paid tribute to Ukrainian soldiers killed in the war. The delegation was led by Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal and included EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas and British Foreign Secretary David Lammy.
It is European Day in Europe that we celebrate, and I think it's very symbolic that we are here. I think everybody who cares for freedom should see what we are seeing here today.
And we are absolutely crystal clear that Mr. Putin should bring this war to an end, should accept the ceasefire that President Trump has urged him to accept, and should understand that if he does not do that, then of course he will meet the force of the international community with a severe package of sanctions.
Following the ceremony, the ministers gathered for a meeting where they signed the Lviv Statement, a joint declaration endorsing the creation of a special tribunal to prosecute Russia for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the meeting in a video message, calling the tribunal a moral obligation and a necessary step to deter future acts of aggression. The proposed tribunal would be established under the framework of the Council of Europe. Legal groundwork for the court has already been completed, and it could begin operating as early as next year. While Russian officials currently have immunity while in office, the tribunal would allow prosecutors to prepare cases for when that immunity expires. In addition to that, the European Union pledged €1 billion to Ukraine from the proceeds of frozen Russian assets. According to Kaja Kallas, the funding will be directed to Ukrainian defence companies. The United Kingdom also announced new sanctions targeting Russia's so-called shadow fleet, used to transport oil in violation of international restrictions. European governments continue to support a proposed 30-day ceasefire, originally put forward by the United States.
Russia marked the 80th anniversary of Victory Day with a large military parade in central Moscow, as President Vladimir Putin and 29 foreign leaders watched from Red Square.
Russia celebrates the 80th anniversary of the World War II victory over Nazi Germany with a military parade led by President Vladimir Putin and attended by Chinese President Xi Jinping. Moscow, particularly Red Square and surrounding areas, has been under a tight lockdown. The event honours the end of World War II and those who served, but preparations have taken place under heightened security following 3 days of Ukrainian drone strikes. The attacks disrupted Moscow airports, affecting around 60,000 travellers and causing delays or cancellations of about 350 flights. Ukraine and Russia have accused each other of violating a 3-day ceasefire. Representatives from nearly 30 countries have attended the event. China, Belarus, Cuba and several Central Asian nations sent high-level delegations, while leaders from Serbia and Slovakia were the only European representatives. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev and Laos's leader cancelled their trips to Russia for Victory Day at the last minute. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky criticised the Russian military parade on May 9th as a parade of cynicism, accusing Moscow of rewriting history and glorifying aggression. Meanwhile, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un marked Victory Day with a rare visit to the Russian embassy in Pyongyang, pledging stronger ties with Moscow. North Korean soldiers in uniform were spotted observing the parade. A Chinese military contingent also paraded in Red Square. The Kremlin emphasized that the attendance of leaders from Asia, Africa and Latin America shows Russia is not isolated.
The US and China are back at the table with high-stakes talks set for this weekend in Switzerland as both sides try to ease trade tensions. The goal of the talks is to ease a tariff battle which has shaken global trade. President Trump has floated an 80% tariff on Chinese goods, down from the current 145%. But the White House says any deal must include Chinese concessions. Talks will also cover fentanyl and national security concerns. Joining us now on the eve of renewed trade talks between the United States and China is international business consultant Jorge Costa Oliveira. Thanks for being with us. Now, both sides appear optimistic about these talks. Is transactional de-escalation now a realistic possibility?
Well, thank you very much. I don't think it's very realistic to expect any great progress now. Most analysts expect this to be just the beginning of talks. The reports from China, from think tanks in China, mention that the delegation that China is sending does not even have great powers to close any deal. And more important than that, from the Chinese leadership point of view, they have repeatedly said that appeasement cannot buy peace, nor can compromise earn respect. So I don't think that China is going to get out of that stand. There may be some details on fighting fentanyl trade, and eventually some other minor issue in the overall context of a commercial war. But I would say that from China's side, there is a clear notion that time runs in their favor. And this has to do with the fact that as time goes by and the instability arising from the commercial war remains, even without tariffs being applied to other countries, the rates of approval of the American president go down. And if they continue to go down, as it seems to be the trend, the American leverage vis-a-vis China in the negotiation decreases. So for all these reasons, I don't think that China is going to be very willing to compromise or very interested even in solving or moving forward significantly in these talks.
What about the real-world impact of this? What effect will this have? And you say this is just the beginning. So in terms of everyday trade and everyday people's lives, will we feel the impact of these talks at all?
Well, yes. These are the two largest, if the European Union is considered an economic bloc, these are two of the three largest economic blocs in the world, and both of them with very big egos. So a prolonged situation, as it seems to be the most realistic approach now, is going to have very, very severe impacts. The first severe impact is going to be on the growth of both economies, and the second impact is going to be on the interest rates of the dollar, which probably, or the US treasuries, that probably will reflect also then on the first factor, which is economic growth. But on economic growth, the main concern that exists today is that from the American side, clearly unemployment has already started rising. Inflation has not started rising because only the tariffs are applied to China and in minor ways to Canada and Mexico, but it is already being projected in terms that are scary. For instance, Goldman Sachs, which is hardly considered a leftist entity, estimates or predicts that the inflation rate in the United States by the end of the year will be between 6 and 8%. So if it is around, even if it's just 6%, this will force the Fed to intervene and to raise the interest rates, the reference interest rates, and that will slow down the American economy. On the other hand, in terms of just looking at interest rates, and there's a lot of information about this that seems to go in the same direction. And although only a small portion of U.S. treasuries, meaning the titles of the United States federal debt, are in the hands of foreign countries, the main holders of those treasuries are Japan, with roughly 1.1 trillion, and China with 760 billion. Now, China, about a month ago, sent us a warning salvo by selling 50 billion. The selling of this 50 billion immediately rose the interest rate of the Fed, of the treasuries, from 3.9% to 4.5%. Talk about treasuries, 10 years maturity treasuries, which are the most important ones for reference. Now, Japan, during the talks that have taken place for these tariffs, which did not go well. The Japanese were not happy with the fact that they sent a high-level delegation and the Americans were constantly changing their proposals. After that, the Japanese Ministry of Finance threatened that Japan would also sell or would not exclude selling part of their US treasuries. Actually, it was even more serious than that. It was read by the markets as dumping a significant part of it. Now, then they backtracked. But the reality is that before this statement, Japan had actually sold 71 or 72 billion, which is the largest sale ever in the secondary market. So they did it quietly, unlike China, but they did it. So the warning is there. And this year, I mean, the overall federal public debt is 37 trillion, of which 9 trillion have to be refinanced this year. 6 trillion in June, 3 trillion in September.
That's all now, very interesting there. Thank you so much for your input.
If Japan or China sell, the interest rate will go higher, and this will be a disaster in terms of not only of refinancing of the United States, but also in terms of the interest rates internally in the United States. And that will affect the United States and all the other main economies in the world.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us there and for your insights. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is visiting Saudi Arabia on Saturday to meet with high-ranking officials in Riyadh. He's later scheduled to visit Qatar to take part in the Iran-Arab World Dialogue Summit in Doha.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is visiting Saudi Arabia on Saturday to meet with high-ranking officials in Riyadh. And later in the day is scheduled to visit Qatar to take part in the Iran-Arab World Dialogue Summit in Doha. His visits take place before the upcoming summit meeting between the Persian Gulf Arab leaders and U.S. President Donald Trump, scheduled for 14th of May in Saudi Arabia, and just one day ahead of the next Iran-U.S. talks, which is to convene on Sunday in Muscat, Oman. Last April, Defense Minister of Saudi Arabia, Prince Khalid bin Salman Al Saud, paid a landmark visit to Tehran and met senior Iranian officials. Earlier this week, a report by Associated Press saying U.S. President Trump is likely to make a statement on calling the Persian Gulf the Arab Gulf during his upcoming visit to Saudi Arabia received unanimous negative feedback in Iran and among the Iranian expatriates worldwide. Foreign Minister Araghchi denounced Trump's reported plan to officially rename the Persian Gulf and called it an insult to all Iranians. Araghchi Arokci has confirmed that his fourth round of indirect nuclear talks with the U.S. Special Envoy for Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will be held on Sunday in the Omani capital, Muscat. The talks, mediated by the Sultanate of Oman, started in April and have been held twice in Oman and in Rome on one occasion. During the current talks, the U.S. wants Iran to halt its nuclear enrichment. However, Iran has categorically rejected this demand as a red line and wants removal of all unilaterally imposed U.S. sanctions on its nuclear program. So far, both sides have termed the talks as constructive. Turash Shiralilu, reporting for A-News TV, Tehran.
Armenia and Azerbaijan are now engaged in direct negotiations over a peace agreement, with Russia's role as mediator considered complete. That's according to Armenian Security Council Secretary Armen Grigorian. Grigorian added that Armenia considers direct talks with Azerbaijan to be more productive, but there are no updates regarding the signing of the peace agreement. On the 13th of March, Armenia's foreign ministry announced that Yerevan and Baku had agreed on the text of the peace agreement, and that Armenian officials were waiting for Baku to propose a date and venue for the signing. However, Baku has consistently maintained that no peace agreement will be possible unless the OSCE Minsk group is formally dissolved through a joint application by both countries, and Armenia removes from its constitution any reference to the Declaration of Independence, which contains territorial claims against Azerbaijan's Karabakh region. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has expressed strong optimism about the prospects for lasting peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. He stated that there would be no war between the two countries, emphasizing that the region is moving towards peace. He said the draft peace agreement aimed at normalizing relations has been finalized and is ready to be signed. He noted that the region deserves to live in peace and prosperity and reaffirmed Armenia's commitment to that goal, whilst acknowledging what he described as ongoing internal and external provocations. He said that Armenia is committed to building peaceful relations with Azerbaijan. Previously, A-News' James Ezimoha discussed Pashinyan's statement with Narek Manassian, associate expert at the Research Center on Security Policy in Yerevan. Narek shared his understanding as to how the statement, which declared there will be no war but peace with Azerbaijan and referenced internal and external provocations, should be interpreted, as well as what proposals Armenia has made to Azerbaijan and how the EU can support regional stability and peace negotiations.
In my opinion, this is yet another expression of Armenia's political will to establish peace in the region. At the same time, Yerevan has made several constructive proposals, by the way, aimed at building mutual trust between the sides. For example, mirror withdrawal of the troops from the borderline, establishment of the joint mechanism for the investigations of border incidents, or creation of arms control mechanism, or restoration of rail freight transportation, and so on. As long as there is no peace agreement between the sides, there will always be forces that will not be interested in peace, and or they won't believe in peace prospect. And on this path, it's very important also to pay more attention on the rhetoric, to prevent some irredentist rhetoric in the region, to investigate all the shootings that are targeting Armenian bordering villages, because all these actions, they are harming the peace process. I believe European Union and Armenia relations are currently stronger than ever. As is known, Yerevan and Brussels now are negotiating on a new partnership agreement, and it is expected that the new document would be signed in the upcoming weeks, and it will update the current legal framework that is a comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement. So beside that, Armenia and the EU last year we launched the dialogue on the peace, on the visa liberalization process. Besides that, Armenia has been involved in the European Peace Facility. I would like to mention also the role of the European Monitoring Mission in Armenia that plays an important role in ensuring stability in the region. Just summing up all these interactions, we can say that one of the main objectives of EU-Armenia cooperation is to strengthen Armenia's resilience in the region, which we believe is a very important and crucial factor for the stability of the region.
Well, James also discussed the statement with Murad Muradov, co-founder and deputy director of the Chop-Shubashov Center. Murad explained how the message has been received in Baku and shared insights on the regional response from Azerbaijan's perspective.
I think this is an important and timely message, especially at the moment when it's almost 2 months since the parties announced their preliminary agreement on the terms of a draft treaty. But since then, no major breakthrough has been made, which made some commentators suggest that maybe the process is stalled. I think it was a good reminder that the sides are continuing to work on resolving the remaining frictions and to have a broader roadmap for future steps. So I think also the context is important since now we see significant increase in global instability. We see rising tensions in different parts of the world, the Middle East, India, Pakistan, and I think for us, Azerbaijan right now is very important to get some proofs that Armenia is only going to be engaged in the certain big power games in the region. And this is what also President Aliyev is always emphasizing, that this treaty should not be a matter of concern for third parties, which do not have genuine interests in the peace and stability in the South Caucasus.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to pay an official visit to Kazakhstan in June. While details of the upcoming visit have not yet been disclosed, the high-level meeting highlights the ongoing dialogue between Astana and Beijing. Our correspondent Fariza Kalamazina has more.
China's President Xi Jinping is expected to visit Kazakhstan next month. The news came as Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev and Chinese Chairman Xi Jinping had held talks prior to a festive concert at the Kremlin Palace. President Xi is expected to arrive in Astana to take part in the second Central Asia-China summit, during which new directions for strategic cooperation will be outlined. Kazakhstan is actively preparing for the summit, with the signing of key documents, including the Astana Declaration, anticipated during the event. At the same time, experts note that the issue of responding to challenges related to the trade war between the US and China will be one of the key topics for discussion at the upcoming second summit. Xi Jinping's most recent trip took place on July 2nd last year, when he attended the 21st meeting of the Council of Heads of State of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and made a state visit at President Tokayev's invitation. During that visit, she described Tokayev as a dear friend and hailed the 30-year relationship between the two nations as a golden era, pledging that China will always be a reliable pillar for Kazakhstan. China remains a dominant trade and investment partner in Central Asia. According to China's General Administration of Customs, bilateral trade between Kazakhstan and China reached $43.8 billion in 2024. Kazakhstan's exports to China totaled $15.8 billion, a 9% year-on-year increase, setting a new record in trade turnover. If this visit takes place, it will be Xi Jinping's sixth trip to Kazakhstan. Meanwhile, in Moscow, President Tokayev has held a series of bilateral meetings with other world leaders attending events in the Russian capital. He met with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Myanmar's Prime Minister, and Serbian President. Fariza Kalimurzina, A News, in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Well, joining us from Almaty in Kazakhstan is Nobulat Nishanbayev, expert in international relations. Thanks for being with us. Now, what are the expectations surrounding President Xi Jinping's anticipated visit to Kazakhstan?
Actually, upcoming Xi Jinping's visit to Astana will be very important not only to Kazakhstan, but I think for the whole region, because it's one of the first Central Asia-China summit after Trump came to the power, after the escalation in the global politics. One of the main important topics will be, of course, logistics, investment and economy and tourism. So this part, which is quietly away from the politics, primarily focused on the economics and trade, are expanding in the last couple of years between China and Kazakhstan. So therefore, Chinese One Belt project is kind of very important project for the Kazakhstan, which is making Kazakhstan as a bridge between the Europe and Asia. So therefore, this upcoming visit Xi Jinping will identify strategic importance between the Kazakhstan and the Central and the Chinese relations for the long term. One of the main key topics as well, Chinese vision towards the global politics world order. Kazakhstan, as I have said earlier, is one of the main supporters of the United Nations style charter-based world order. China is also trying to create its own vision, which also supports the charters of the United Nations. So therefore, upcoming visit Xi Jinping to Astana will create long-standing strategic relations between the Central Asian countries and China. It will surely expand the trade relations, trade turnover between Kazakhstan and China. For example, last year we have seen the trade turnover between Kazakhstan and China above $43 billion. So it shows China is rising in Central Asia, comparatively way higher comparing to the 10 years before.
So tell me more about Kazakhstan's approach to foreign policy, and could we expect any shifts as a result of this expected visit?
That's a very interesting question. Actually, Kazakhstan foreign policy, the independence period, is called multivectoralism, having bilateral, multilateral, equal relations with all other partners. But this time, I think Kazakhstan is giving what is required to China in terms of the vectors. But however, for Kazakhstan, as a state which is transcontinental, the state on the crossroad of the many great powers is not efficient, is not important for Kazakhstan's vision, for Kazakhstan's interest, having strongest vector like China or USA. So therefore, Kazakhstan's relations, Kazakhstan vision in 2025 to China is a kind of expanding one vector towards the eastern vector to China in terms of economy and logistics in order to create a balance-based system in the region.
Certainly one to watch, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Afghanistan and Iran have taken a significant step towards deepening trade and industrial ties. Officials from both countries met in Kabul this week to discuss a wide range of initiatives aimed at strengthening economic cooperation. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
In Kabul, the acting Minister of Industry and Commerce Nuruddin Azizi met with Ali Raza Begdili, the acting head of the Iranian embassy, to chart a roadmap for stronger trade and industrial cooperation between the two neighbors. During the meeting, the two sides discussed plans to increase Afghanistan's exports to Iran, expand the role of the Joint Chamber of Commerce, establish joint industrial companies, and create a shared industrial free zone along the border. They also explored investment opportunities in key infrastructure projects, including the Kaf-Herat Railway. A statement from the Iranian embassy noted that officials from both countries reviewed plans for cooperation in trade and industry, with both sides expressing satisfaction over growing momentum and promising outlook for their partnership. The meeting also paved the way for an upcoming visit by Iranian's Minister of Industry, Mine and Trade to Afghanistan and the hosting of the 7th Joint Economic Cooperation Commission. Discussions also touched on holding a trilateral meeting between Afghanistan, Iran and India on the development of Chabahar port, a key maritime hub located in southeastern Iran. Chabahar provided landlocked Afghanistan with vital access to international waters, bypassing Pakistan's ports. The port, which has been partially developed with Indian investment, is operational and handling cargo shipments, but remains under expansions to increase its capacity and connectivity. With trade routes and partnerships expanding, officials from both countries are optimistic about a future of closer economic collaboration. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
Ankara and Athens are setting their sights on deepening economic ties. Turkish and Greek officials say they are committed to boosting bilateral trade to $10 billion as cooperation expands across multiple sectors. The announcement came at the Turkey-Greece Business Forum held in Istanbul.
Cooperation between Ankara and Athens will expand across various sectors to help reach the $10 billion bilateral trade goal. Turkish Deputy Foreign Minister Mehmet Kemal Bozay said at the Turkey-Greece Business Forum in Istanbul. Bozay said Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's 2023 visit to Greece resulted in an agreement with Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis to strengthen economic ties, and the two countries' foreign ministers have been working closely together since then. Bozay emphasized the importance of expanding cooperation beyond traditional trade, pointing to new opportunities in transportation, infrastructure, tourism, and green innovation.
Beyond trade and infrastructure, there are vast opportunities for collaboration in sectors such as energy, tourism, digital technologies, and green innovation. By combining our respective strengths, we can create synergies that drive sustainable development and economic resilience. Last year, tourism between our two countries reached record-breaking levels. A total of 1.1 million Turkish tourists visited Greece, and 680,000 Greek tourists traveled to Turkey by the end of 2024. These impressive numbers are the result of the positive climate in our bilateral relations.
Greek Deputy Foreign Minister for Economic Diplomacy Tassos Hadjivassiliou also highlighted the role of economic diplomacy and mutual respect.
Dear friends, cooperation in the energy sector can make a meaningful contribution to regional peace and stability. Energy projects that bring mutual benefit also play a vital role in enhancing security across our region, which is full of challenges and turbulences in that period of time. For example, dear friends, the Trans-Anatolian natural gas pipeline and the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, two key pillars of the Southern Gas Corridor, are landmark infrastructure projects standing as strong examples of successful international cooperation in the field of energy.
Both sides say the path forward depends on sincere dialogue and mutual benefit, rooted in stability and international law.
Well, that's all we have for now from Baku. Stay tuned to A News for more updates and have a wonderful day.